Let's find out why. Prof, good afternoon to you. Always a pleasure having you on the show with us. I want to just quote the opening line of your Daily Maverick article, just for viewers at home. Let me read it. It is the season of electoral gifts. Now, the question is, when you get a gift, you normally get a receipt to return it if you don't like what you've got. Do you think these electoral gifts we're going to want to return?
In various forms, they could, yes. Some of them could very well still end up in a constitutional court, flawed and pushed through at this stage very much to please constituencies that have been promised this law will be there when we come to election XYZ. In May 2019, and others are sort of excluding and disadvantaging, if not seriously damaging, other parts of constituencies where just legislation is rushed, although some of these pieces of legislation have been in a pipeline for a long time, but now they're getting to the cut-off point. They have until the 20th May, National Assembly, NCOP, and then the President has to sign in law. But even if some of these laws are not yet signed off, bills are not signed into law, the ANC could in his campaigning say, yes, but we've made progress, it is there within very reasonable time after the elections. But yes, they are sometimes wobbly in sense of neglecting some constituencies or damaging others.
Like what? Give me an example. What comes top of mind? If someone was reading that article, that very in-depth article of yours on Daily Maverick, and you say some are wobbly, some are outright dangerous, what's the one that stands out for you?
Oh, you know, for example, one can look at the traditional leadership bills and the traditional leaders and Khoisan bill. There are so many flaws in that piece of legislation where people can come in and feel they are disadvantaged. Many people argue about some of the basic premises of the old apartheid system, and its orientation towards traditional leadership are reincarnated in this bill. And then there is something like the Copyright Amendment Bill, which is, many aspects of it are very necessary. Department of Trade and Industry has been pushing that one. And yes, it does bring many forms of justice for performing arts, for example, singers who have never had proper copyright of their productive outputs, but then in its use of fair access, fair use, they also neglect and they damage authors' rights and the publishing industry in South Africa, in that they do not protect the creators, generators of knowledge and original creative writing.
It's all good and well to suggest that the bills are going to get pushed through before the elections, but to appease certain constituencies. But this is also why we have the Constitutional Court. It's to protect you and I, isn't it? Even if the ruling party wanted to, they are going to be delayed. There are mechanisms to stop the wobbly and even dangerous bills are being pushed through, aren't there?
It is indeed.
That's not
but
failing,
then
is
we
it?
have to remember that those people who will be reaping the benefits, they are also being disadvantaged because there is going to be another delay in the process and it's not as if lobbying on these pieces of legislation that I mentioned has not been done. There's been a lot of lobbying, but there has been selective listening in many, many cases. And that means if there are appeals against this legislation, for example, the Copyright Amendment Bill, then it is also the creative artists in the performing industries especially who really need those changes in that bill. But they are also going to suffer because not all aspects have been thoroughly considered.
Let's talk about one of the other big talking points, which is going to affect a lot of people, and it's going to be, I imagine, part of almost every political party's manifesto. If you read far enough on page 80 of their manifestos, it's going to be the National Minimum Wage Act, which came into effect on the 1st of January. The ANC, I would imagine, are going to claim victory over that one, and there's more to come.
Oh, definitely, yes. That is a big achievement for their campaign to put it forward as a benchmark. That was promised and that has been achieved. And there are not serious challenges to that, except for the fact that it's really regarded as too low. But the ANC is pitching that as a good entrance point, basic protection that they've got in there. And the ANC will really be looking after their Labour constituency moving forward, just as they're looking after seriously their traditional leadership and traditional rural constituencies, because traditional leaders retain huge power in rural areas of South Africa and power over their communities. And that is always a very good access point for political parties. They can get the allegiance, loyalty of these leaders.
But the South African voting public aren't stupid. The joys of 24-hour news channels like ours, social media,
Yes.
websites. I would imagine a majority of the electorate, and correct me, Professor, if I'm wrong, are aware of the failures of government and political parties. And I imagine that there is a number of initiatives, there's a number of big league promises even, that they're going to be held accountable to as well. How different is the electorate, do you think, 5 years ago to what we're going to see come May?
The electorate generally is absolutely more cynical, more critical. They've been so disillusioned with politics, with party politics, with political parties generally. And that's where political parties actually benefit from this widespread cynicism across the board. All political parties really are regarded with much cynicism. But people love, South African voters love their voting. They're still going to vote. We see that from preliminary public opinion polls. They want to be out there and go and vote, and they have to make a choice. And so cynical and all. And I really, in my own research, I call this forthcoming election the suspension of disbelief. They've seen all these parties falter, mess up in a big way, and yet they are still going to choose one of them to vote for. So it's really contradictory. And cynicism that the information that's available, ability to critique, and yet they are going to endorse one of those parties, perhaps with better expectations, better chances of accountability after that. We don't know yet.
Does that not smack in the face of the research we've seen around voter apathy? We can talk about youth apathy in a moment, but voter apathy, almost what you're saying now is almost in contradiction of that. Most people going, I don't like what any of you are saying. You're all saying the same thing. None of you are delivering anything you're saying, so I'm not going to bother.
Yes, I think in this pre-election period, that's also a form of bargaining with the political parties. Say, you have got maybe until the 20th of March, maybe in other respects, different types of action that can still happen. But they're trying to, South African electorate try to extract as many promises and undertakings in the pre-election time as they can possibly get, because they know this is the time they're seeing their representatives. Maybe they're not going to see them for another 5 years. So they're trying to extract as much promises as possible, and threatening not to vote is a big bargaining card that they have.
And just one of the final questions to you, Prof. As far as bargaining cards and bargaining chips are concerned, I'm glad you used that turn of phrase. When it comes to trying to rush these bills through Parliament, this is primarily when I imagine, if I was an opposition political strategist, I would start blocking anything that would make a ruling party or another political party look good. Parliament can do that. MPs can start using this as a blocking tactic, can't they?
They can, but because the ANC still has a big majority in that Parliament, and it's not below 2/3, but we're not talking about constitutional changes at this stage. The ANC can really pass any legislation within these constitutional and procedural limitations that we have. They can pass it, and opposition parties at best can put on their record, we try to oppose, we said it will be wrong, we alerted everybody to these possible pitfalls that there are, and that is the best that some of the political parties, the opposition parties, will be able to take the electorate, say, you'd better strengthen our hand next time around. If we're bigger, we could have made a bigger difference.
See how important it is to go out and vote. Professor, thank you very much indeed for coming to speak to us. No doubt we're going to speak plenty more as we build up to the 8th of May. Professor Susan Boyson joining us here on Newsnight.